But I would like to shift gears a little bit now. And you mentioned NATO, you mentioned being on the ground in the Balkans. And the thing that struck me the most about your biography is that you describe yourself as a human shield on the bridges of Belgrade during the horrific NATO bombings in 1999. So can you elaborate on this? It's such a visual and a really shocking description to talk about yourself in this way. Can you explain it, please?
And I was like most people, just believing what I would hear on TV. Not so much. I'm interested in politics, but reading mainstream media, and unfortunately or fortunately, I had to open my eyes in the 1990s with the wars in Yugoslavia because my family was concerned. I would go to Yugoslavia frequently on vacation. I had family there, and then all of a sudden, I was portrayed as a Serbian, as a bad guy, as a villain, and I would see media documentaries and saying how bad the Serbs were and killing people, eating kids and whatever. And say, wait, this is not true. I'm not saying that all Serbs are saints, definitely not. But we're very far from objective information. And I was receiving information from Yugoslavia, and at that time, and I wasn't influenced. That was the big thing. So, I was trying to get information, try to understand. I was saying, how can we get to this situation where all of a sudden we're only talking about war? And this was my concern. Saying Europe was built for stability, it was for peace. And that's what we were told in France. And all of a sudden there's an occasion to show that because Europe is so strong, because it's got strong foundations, and because it believes staunchly in peace and defending the people, that there's a problem in Yugoslavia, but they'll find a peaceful solution to get out of it. But instead of advocating this peaceful solution, the West, Brussels, European nations, and the US did everything so that the Balkan nations fight against each other. And I started discovering that progressively. And I was shocked because I never thought that Western countries could do that. I was really convinced that Western countries, that's why my father left Yugoslavia to go to the West, because he thought the West was democracy, the West was freedom of speech. And I started finding out by reading both sides, hearing both sides of the story, that we were warmongers, that we were fueling war between brotherly nations. I'm not saying that the situation between Croats and Serbs and Bosniaks was always, and Albanians, was a long-standing love affair. But they're very close nations, and finding a solution was possible. Serbs and Croats probably speak, the language is the same, the food is close. There have been strong fights and terrible things done between both, but there was a possibility, and we were going for war. And in 1999, all of a sudden, with no validation whatsoever from the UN Security Council, with no reason whatsoever, NATO, which is a defensive organization, and I thought really NATO was here to protect us, they bombed Serbia illegally, totally illegally, and nobody said anything to any. There were no sanctions against any NATO member. They bombed illegally Serbia, and they bombed. The fighting was in Kosovo in 1999. They bombed Novi Sad, Novi Pazar, Belgrade. They bombed towns which had nothing to do with the fighting, and so that was enough for me. And at that time, I had already read enough literature to understand what was going on. So I went as a human. There's nothing much I could do, but at least to defend my family and to show that I was really against this, I went on the different bridges of Belgrade as a human shield to say, listen, to show the Serbians, not everybody in the West is a warmonger, and to say, listen, this is crazy. So as NATO was bombing, bridges, they bombed maternity, they bombed energy facilities. They were not bombing the military. And so nothing happened. While I was there, they didn't bomb the bridges on which I was there, but this was very strong for me. This is, I said, I have to do something. It's not much, but either I could just say, okay, let's go to something else. My life is okay. I'm getting out of it. Okay, tough time for the Serbs, but they'll make it. They've made it before. So I didn't want to do that. And once I went on the other side of the Rubicon, then that was over. It's okay. Now I'm not going to shut up until the end, because this is really unfair. We had innocent people getting killed. We had people fighting against each other for other people's interests. And to what results? The Balkan today is one of the poorest regions of Western Europe. There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of crime. A lot of people are dreaming of going to the West again. There's no prosperity. And believe me, unfortunately, there's still a lot of hatred between the countries. So despite all these bombs, these billions which were spent in the Balkans, the US and NATO have not brought peace to the region. So after that, I said, okay, I'm going to keep on studying these regions. But at the same time, when I go there, this is my personal opinion. So this is the way I approach this topic. And not everybody has to do this, but this is the way I approach it, is that if I'm going to go to a very poor region, I have a difficult time just being as a tourist, or just even if I'm analyzing, even if I'm reading, if I'm discussing. So I tried getting a bit of help. And we built quite a big organization for Kosovo called Solidarity for Kosovo. Today, over 12,000 French give money to the Serbs and the minorities of Kosovo. So we've developed that a lot. And so I keep on going there to get my information, to understand what's going on. But at the same time, we're helping the people. And it's helping me to understand better, because, you know, the Japanese say this is for business, but it applies to real life. They talk about genshi genbutsu. That means you have to go. They tell their management, you have to go into the industry to see what's going on. And I applied that to war zone. I have to go to the war zone. What's going on? Why are people hate? Do they really hate each other? Who's behind this? Whose interests are being served? And you can, to some extent, you could read a lot in the books, but you always get a much better perception on the ground. So I've been doing that in Kosovo since 2005. So we started that 6 years after the 1919 bombings, actually when there was a pogrom against the Serbian population by Albanian extremists in 2004. And so with a friend said, this is enough. So we started setting that up. And then I applied the same thing, but we could talk about this later, to Donbass. Because when I understood what was going on in 2013 in Ukraine, I said, whoa, we're going to another dimension, because Yugoslavia could not fight back. Serbia could not fight back. Heroically, it resisted 78 days against NATO, the world's most, I would say, impressive military coalition of all times. And Serbs resisted 78 days, and they're very proud of that, and I'm proud of that as well. But I mean, after a moment, you just can't continue living when you've got no more when you've got no more bridges, when your schools are being bombed, when the civilian infrastructure is being bombed on a daily basis. But Ukraine and Russia, we're talking about Russia, nuclear power. This was bound to end in bad if nobody was to do anything. So I did the same thing we did in Kosovo. We started doing it in Donbass with another organization called West East.
Wow, I have probably 100 questions in my mind that I'm trying to filter through. This was really fascinating and elucidating. And we've had other analysts on this channel who physically been to these places, making a similar parallel between Donbass and the Balkans, and also, of course, that nuclear component that is different as compared to the former Yugoslavia. But my initial question is, when you were there in 1999, how did the Serbs perceive you? Did they perceive you as a foreigner or as one of theirs? Or did they recognize your dual identity in this way?
No, so, I mean, Onye naš, that's what they say. He's ours. That's the way. So,
interesting.
Yeah, they always see that. I mean, and anybody who's got a Serbian, well, if you've got a bit of Serbian blood, then you are naš, you're ours. So no, they understood that. And I came along actually with some French friends who had nothing to do with Serbia, who were just disgusted by what France was doing, by what NATO was doing, and had a lot of sympathy for the struggle and the resistance of the Serbian people, and they all appreciated that. And they were also surprised because they said, "Wow, I mean, we're coming from the bombing country, but they've been treating really well." People understood, because I think also, and this is important, there still is even today to some extent a strong education. People understand. People they don't have this black and white vision, Manichaean vision that we've got in the West, good guys, bad guys. So as long as you have this education and you teach your people, the people are enticed to read, to find out, then you can have a normal conversation, and they would understand. And I could have even come with somebody who was very pro NATO. They would have discussed. They would have started with the coffee and then some rakia, and they would have drunk all night, just to understand, and they wouldn't have this vision. And some things I heard, and I was even told in French, "You're Serbian, go home." You know, I was told that in France. Guys, I've spent most of my life in France, and how can you say that? So very primitive, very primitive remarks, and you get those remarks by people who are uneducated. And when I'm saying uneducated, I'm not talking about universities. I'm talking just about people who live in a society where you are eager to learn, to understand. And in Yugoslavia, we could say a lot of things about Yugoslavia, but in the Yugoslav system, even though you could not say all that you wanted, you still were encouraged to learn. And the people in Yugoslavia in the 90s, they wanted to understand. Let me just one example. When I was there, I had access to CNN and the BBC. And there was no way that in France or Germany or in the US, you can have access to Serbian TV, or at least to an outlet giving the Serbian or Yugoslav point of view. That was impossible. And I was saying, wow, who are the proponents of free speech? This was kind of a shock for me. So, but that was a situation. So yeah, the greeting by the Serbs was really fantastic. It was really good. And that's why I think coming back, I said, we have to continue this, because doesn't concern just Yugoslavia. It's not a chauvinist reaction. This concerns a lot of countries, a lot of people in the world. And when you read through Bloom, I forgot his first name's book on the American Empire, Killing Hope, and he lists all the wars that the US and NATO have waged across the world. This is terrible. And I found out that what happened to me, because I was directly concerned because of my family, this happened in Africa, this happened in South America, this happened in Asia. And I didn't feel concerned, so I really didn't care. But once my eyes were open, as I said, then it was too late. I wasn't going to close them again.
It sounds like what you're describing, that positive welcome, is just this basic ability of being able to differentiate between a people and their government that seems to be lacking in the West, but seems to be very much alive, I think, maybe in the so-called Eastern Europe as well. So would you say the NATO engagement in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, is sort of the moment of disillusionment for you?
Yeah, definitely. That was too far. Even the 1990s war was difficult. I was born Yugoslav. I had Yugoslav documents, and then all of a sudden my documents are worthless, and the history of the country and all that. So I was, quite proud to be Serbian. It's okay. And I did think actually in the 90s, okay, maybe this is better for us. But going through the history books and discussing with the people in Bosnia, Croatia, and Slovenia, I said, well, maybe, we had a nation of 20 million people. I'm not saying that it was ideal, but definitely splitting up the way it did through war, pushed by the US, by Brussels, because they wanted to send a message to Russia, and they wanted to send a message to the rest of the world that the Cold War was over, that there was one winner, and that if you disagreed with that, because that was Yugoslavia's, I would say, fault, that it was the big grievance from Belgrade, was that they did not want to be aligned. They just said, okay, listen, if you guys want to enter the European Union, go, or European Economic Community, go. I want to be in a non-aligned country. I'm independent. And the Atlantic said, no, there's no place for independent countries in the world we're building. In this globalized world, there's no place for you. So if you don't abide, you'll be destroyed. And so, and that was for me definitely an eye opener. And I think this is the crucial point where in my life I said, okay, we cannot tolerate this, because this is going to end bad if we continue like this, because this is the stuff empires are made of, and we know how empires all finish off. So we have to stop this before this gets out of hand.
So if you wanted to recommend a single book that people could start with on the Balkans, which one of your books would you recommend to our viewers?
Listen, it's in French, it's in Spanish, it's been translated in Spanish and Italian for our Spanish-Italian friends. It's Le Martírio de Kosovo. That's the martyrdom of Kosovo. And I just give the history of the region. And I don't want to get too much in a chauvinistic position, because Serbs obviously defend the Serbian vision and Albanians have another vision. But I try to be objective as possible. And reading, I would say, a lot of people are historians who don't think like me. And I think that's the best way to attack a subject, is by showing that you've got a view of what's being said on both sides, because at one way or another you'll have to build a bridge. So you have to find out what are the areas that you can build on that bridge, because Albanians and Serbians, they'll always be neighbors. You can't just take one of the two people, put them in the shuttle and ship them off to Mars or Pluto or whatever. So you have to find some way. However, it is important to discuss truth and to defend truth, because you can't be a relativist and say, okay, everybody's right. So in that book, I explain why Kosovo is so important to the Serbs. I explained that there can be peaceful solutions with the Albanians in that region, but I also explained what the role of the Atlanticists, of the West, has been in destroying any sort of peace or relationship that we can imagine between Albanians and Serbs has been destroyed, not by Serbs and Albanians, before by the West, who have pushed one against the other. And so there have been, of course, a lot of Serbs and Albanians who jumped on the bandwagon saying, great, there's a fight, we hate each other, let's go to them. But at the end, this just means a lot of kids getting killed. It means a lot of culture being destroyed, and it's sad for everybody. So in this book, The Martyrdom of Kosovo, I try to explain why this is important for the Serbs, why the Serbs have created Kosovo, because Kosovo is a Serbian word, and how the West lied. How the left lied to bomb, saying that there was a genocide of Albanians. There's been no genocide of Albanians. How NATO bombing made things worse actually for the Albanians in the short term. How after NATO arrived, it has made things terrible for the Serbs. Over 200 Serbs fled, who survived Ottoman Empire, 5 centuries of Ottoman Empire, had to flee after 70 days of bombing and of NATO, and 40,000 NATO troops on the ground. And explaining the lies. I mean, French President Chirac, we had Clinton, Tony Blair, they all lied. And so I give all these lies in the book, saying this is what they said and this is reality. And I end off saying, listen, what happened? So the bombings were in 1999, we're in 2024. So the last edition of the book is, I think, 3 years ago. What's the situation of Kosovo? It's nobody, I mean, it's a country which has the recognition of mainly Atlantist countries. Russia doesn't recognize Kosovo, China, India, Algeria, the whole South American continent doesn't recognize Kosovo. The Vatican doesn't recognize Kosovo as an independent country. That means nobody recognizes it as an independent country. It's receiving a lot, billions and billions of euros and dollars from European and American taxpayers. It's a hub, it's a crime hub in Europe. It's totally a failed state. Serbs and minorities, because we talk about the Serbs, but there are also Gorani, there are Roma, there are Christian Roma, Muslim Roma. They're also minorities going through hard times in Kosovo today. And it's not working. This nation building is a failed state. And even the Albanians in Kosovo, they don't believe in Kosovo. They just want to build a greater Albania. So, and we have a responsibility in this as from the West, not as an individual, but our policies have led to that. And one of the U.S.'s biggest military base outside of the U.S. is in Bondsteel, and it had nothing to do. Bondsteel was very far where Serbs in Kosovo and Albanians were fighting. This is very far. They just wanted a military base because they wanted to control what was going on between the Mideast and the Mediterranean, between the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, and the Mediterranean. And this was their end game, and so and it didn't work. So we have to fight against that if we want a peaceful world. It's not always going to be easy. And I don't have a angelical view of mankind like Rousseau had in the end of the 18th century, but there are ways of finding peace, discussing, negotiating, and taking into consideration the interests of the people who live in a given region. And in any case. That's why I try to explain in the book. We have to cut the umbilical. It's not an umbilical cord, by the way, but or it's a reverse umbilical cord if you want. But we have to cut this relationship with Atlanticism, which leads to wars, which leads to hatred, and which leads to a lot of people suffering.
It's shocking to learn that NATO's policies resulted in worse conditions for the Serbs than the Ottomans, because that's definitely not what I would have imagined in my mind.